You'll feel vindicated? That's right. That's right. I'm ready to be vindicated. Do you remember when I said that about Lords of the Fallen? And I was right about everything that I said? And they went back and they changed a lot of the things that I complained about, and the game is basically dead after it came out. It's because I was right all along, and everybody was trying to tell me I was wrong. Like, I'm 100% right on this shit. Sorry to say. I played a lot of these games.
Soulframe. I've been keeping my eye on this one since it was first revealed a couple years ago. Yep. It's the new upcoming game from Warframe developer Digital Extremes. I've had a lot of hope for this title as someone who's played Warframe on and off over the years, starting when it first entered beta way back in 2013. Watching that game evolve and grow, seeing how they've supported it over time, continuously adding new content for free, and probably most importantly, just the fact that whenever I revisit the game, I have a good week or two of fun checking out all of that new free content. Outside of a few long-standing MMOs, Warframe has been one of the most consistent games providing me entertainment over this past decade. So when they
people are very positive about Warframe.
They were making a new game that was sort of like the inverse of Warframe in terms of its tone, setting, and gameplay, while still also leaning into their strengths as a developer. Yeah, that got me interested. You'll no doubt see and feel some similarities between the two. There is certainly visual and style through lines, but there's also quite a bit different. Warframe is sci-fi, Soulframe is fantasy. Warframe is a lobby-based multiplayer game. Soulframe will be more open, shared world, almost MMO light. Warframe's combat is fast-paced, twitchy, and focused on shooting, whereas Soulframe's combat is going to be slower, more heavy, and focused.
Soulframe's combat is twitchy too, but it's not supposed to be. That's the difference.
On melee and magic. And topping it all off is the fact that Soulframe leans into this whole like one with nature, friends of the animals, Princess Mononoke inspired setting and world, which I really, really dig. All of this just kind of results in a game that I am primed to enjoy. Like, I am ready, I am amped up to get into Soulframe. So when DE revealed that they would have this big showcase event hosting Soulframe's first official developer live stream at this year's TennoCon, dude, I was pumped, and I thought surely everyone else is going to be pumped.
Surely it's going to be great.
We're all going to be super excited to get this like new fresh look at Soulframe. This game's coming out soon, right? Everyone's going to be excited, hyped, super pumped for this game. Well, that's not exactly what happened. In fact, after the reveal of this new extended gameplay footage, many people were very much not pumped. Quite the opposite, in fact.
There were a lot of people, actually, who were really mad, and they blamed me. They said that actually the game is great, and it's just Asmongold who's already ruined the game. They're trying to defend it, yeah.
Just about every discussion thread that I read
watched
online,
it when it
the
came
comment
out.
sections were all predominantly negative. And
Absolutely.
the gameplay video itself was not only full of negative comments, but also sits at nearly a 50% dislike ratio.
It's my fault.
Even assuming that there's like a bias towards dislikes from the people who will download a extension for Chrome that shows YouTube dislikes, I can tell you from my own channel, from my own experience, that it's never that far off. Like, maybe it's off by a few percentage points, but not very much. It's typically in line with what the actual video stats are
authentic.
in terms of what you see in the extension, at least from my own experience, from my own channel. So what is everyone so upset about? Well, pretty much the gameplay. Almost universally, the complaints boil down to the look of
the game plays like shit. That's the problem. You look at it, it looks like shit. You look at it played, it plays like shit. That's bad.
Game. Here's some examples. I really hope this is still in very early development. The fighting and combat looks very rough. This can't be released with the current animations. They are honestly extremely subpar and thoroughly unenjoyable. Really digging the knife there. So basically, Warframe devs don't know how to do melee combat?
They can't do range combat either. The range combat in this game was garbage. Like, what are you talking about? It's not like the range combat was good and the melee combat was bad. They were both bad.
One that personally made me chuckle a bit was this one that said, imagine being watched by all your ancestors just to miss that backstab with that animation, which is referring to one of the very first moments of combat actually showcased in the recent video, where the character goes up for the backstab and completely misses the target. Now, the animation starts fine, but then the sword somehow ends up far away from where it's supposed to be.
It just looks like cheap garbage. It does. And I think that I am astonished that the developers thought this would be a good idea to show. And I think this is really what the issue is is that this game had another preview 10 months ago, and the combat was just this bad. It was bad then, it's bad now. So in 10 months, you haven't made this any better. Why would anybody assume it will be fixed by release?
The back, but to the side of the character. And that's just the start of things, really. Now, I gotta say, after watching back this showcase several times, I don't think these complaints are unjustified at all.
Absolutely.
Parts of the combat and character movement in particular do look pretty rough. Now, it's not all bad, but enough of it is clearly bad.
95% of it is bad. Like, I would say 100% of the combat is bad. I think the environment is like about average. The only good part about it is the animations of the animals and being able to go into the other world while you're in the game. That's it.
That it's worth mentioning by quite a few people, because there's been quite a lot of complaining, and the video has about 50% dislike ratio. So here's some examples of, I think, the things that stood out the most to me, where I think a lot of the criticism is coming from. So right away, you've got that very first encounter, right? The character goes up, they go into a stealth animation, they sneak around the back of this group, goes in for the backstab, and it does connect, mind you. You can see it. The NPC reacts, and the NPC loses health, but then the animation just completely whiffs it, like ending up beside its target rather than inside of the back of its target. I don't know how this happened, but it did, right? So completely whiffed backstab animation. Okay. Shortly after that, we then see the character.
DE are really likable guys. You just have to let them cook, but this is what they need to hear. I mean, I really hope so. Because, like, this just looks... It's so problematic. The combat looks like it was made for a kid's show? No, it would be better.
To do this dodge roll, and there seems to be a sliding of like a few extra meters further beyond the distance of the actual roll animation itself, as if the character is like gliding on ice. The whole thing feels off, and there are moments like this all throughout the video where the movement looks very floaty. The character is sliding around, and so are enemy NPCs, and I think this is probably one of the...
It looks like one of these soulless like Unreal 5 tech demo Souls-like cash grabs that you get a new one every month of. That's what it feels like to me.
Primary points where the complaints about gameplay is stemming from. Something about how the character and the enemies move at times feels incredibly disconnected from the environment. There's like a lack of groundedness to the whole thing. But you know what this movement reminds me almost exactly of? Warframe. Surprise, surprise. This sliding movement of the character looks and feels almost identical to what you see in Warframe. I just think that it doesn't much matter to people in that game, since the pacing of the movement is so fast. Your character sliding, double jumping, flying through the air at high velocity, rolling all over the place, doing ninja moves off of the environment.
Can I just be honest? I don't think this looks very good either. It doesn't. Now, the game could be better, but if I look at this visually, this looks very not good. Like, if I saw a trailer for this game, I would think to myself, nope.
Sprinting, dashing, dodging everywhere. Just the speed of that game is so quick that this sort of gliding and the floatiness is almost a feature of the movement, not a problem with it. But in this slower paced setting, sliding all over the place, far beyond where the animations would naturally place the character, it does look very out of place. It just looks bad. And again, I think this is where a lot of the criticism and complaints about this doesn't look good. I think a lot of it is stemming from that. But that's not everything. There were a few other parts of the gameplay sequence that looked off-putting that I think are also raising a lot of criticism.
Like
in the player's first encounter with the boss Nimrod, we see them do a double jump and fire off a bow attack from mid-air. Now, after landing, all of a sudden the camera is just right up on the player, like allowing for barely any awareness.
Am I the only person who has never played a game where the camera being that zoomed into my character has improved my experience of the game? Because I feel like any time that I play a game like that, it always is fucking annoying.
Of the surroundings, to the point where the player then gets struck by this lightning attack that they couldn't see in time because that camera was so close. What I don't know here, though, is if this camera distance was actually moved by the player, the person controlling the character, to try to like highlight the boss animations for this showcase, which is entirely possible, or if this camera closeness was automated by the game when the player target locked onto the boss. If it is the latter, that is no good. It is way too close, and they need to pull this thing back a bit because you can't not see like your surroundings and get struck by lightning because of it. That's not great, especially if most of the time you can be a bit further back. Also, during parts of this sequence,
this is going to be kind of an unpopular opinion, but I think that in games where you're playing third person like this and you are encouraged to aim at an enemy that's directly in front of you, having appear on the ground mechanics is a really fucking annoying, like, difference. It's so fucking obnoxious when you have to aim at something and shoot it, but you also have to look under your feet to make sure that things aren't underneath you. Like, I hate games like that. It's so fucking annoying.
Following encounters with the boss, it's just hard to make out what's even happening. Now, that is partially because the camera is so close, but then also you've got things like the fog, the haze, the lighting effects, and lens flare from attacks from both the boss and the player that just really clutter up the whole thing. Certainly, this video's bitrate doesn't help much either. That's a bit of a mess. It's like the bitrate and the compression and processing that happened on YouTube. I don't know. This thing is like a blurry mess across the board. That doesn't help.
No, you can look at plenty of other games. Elden Ring with 720 bitrate is fine versus this.
But really, the lack of visual clarity and the visual clutter is mostly due to the stuff that's baked into the game. And I think this is another major sticking point for a lot of people. I mean, again, I look at parts of this boss fight and I'm like, what is happening? Like, you can barely see the boss a lot of the time with the lightning flares and the particle effects and the fog and the debris flying everywhere. And then the lens flare popping off the player's shoulder. And when they fire off attacks and when the boss fires off the attacks, there's just this big, heavy amounts of visual clutter. The camera being really close doesn't help that much much either.
I cannot understand why you would show this to the public. Why would you do this?
But yeah, as mentioned earlier, though, I don't think it's all bad, and I do think many parts of the combat look perfectly fine, if not actually good.
I
Particularly
hope so.
the player making attacks, the blocking, the shield slam. Like, yes, it could use a little more oomph. There's a kind of lightness to it all. We could get a more sense of weight would be nice, and I do think there was definitely some alignment issues, but this portion of the gameplay, a lot of those basic fundamentals of combat seems decent enough. Again, I really think the biggest issues and where a lot of these complaints are stemming from are mostly that floaty on ice feeling of the character movement, which just feels right in line with what I'm...
In my opinion, that is like that's the cherry, that's the last thing. Like, yes, obviously that's bad, but there are so many other issues that I didn't even think of that.
Familiar with in Warframe, that heavy amount of visual clutter not helped with the camera being up so tight for parts of it, and then a few standout rough animations. There was some stiffness to the character, like the character sprinting speed. Funnily enough, I thought the jogging animation looked good, but once they went into a sprint, it's like it was a robot all of a sudden. And that backstab animation completely whiffing. And there was a few others in there, like the character lining up attacks and like their feet sliding. But again, that kind of goes into the movement thing. And I do wonder, there's a connectedness between these two games, but they are running their own set of animations. They've got an entirely new animation system that they're using for movement and combat. The developer has talked about this, but clearly running on the same engine and I guess running off the backbone of Warframe, there is a big cross-pollination happening.
Here's the thing, is that if the game doesn't play well, then nobody is going to give a shit. Like, if you tell somebody, oh, like this is an issue like with New World, for example. It's no secret that New World is on an engine that's called Lumberyard that had a lot of setbacks and liabilities with it. And nobody cares about that when they're playing the game and the game is bad. So you can't expect people to be like, oh, it has this engine, that means it's dysfunctional. Nobody is going to think like this.
Happening here, and that floatiness to the movement is one of the biggest, most obvious indicators of that here.
Yeah.
Because, that looks just like a lot of the movement in Warframe with your character sliding all over the place, but it just kind of works in that game, right?
Yeah.
I think because of the pacing, because of the speed. Now, that is the stuff that really stands out to me.
Who said that? People in the community.
The bigger issues,
on
where,
Reddit.
again, I think a lot of the criticisms and complaints are coming from this gameplay showcase. Now, all that said, allow me to engage in a bit of copium here, okay? Partially because of DE's track record, supporting and updating Warframe for going on 12 years now. This game continues to be one of the most popular ongoing live service titles. It is consistently in the top 20 concurrent players on all of Steam. Not bad for being over a decade old. That certainly goes without saying. But then also because I love so much of what they've shown. Like, beyond these issues with gameplay, pretty much everything else about the game I think looks great. The setting, the tone, and the world building. The characters, like that cute little turtle that we saw in the last gameplay showcase. The new Rat Queen, I think she's awesome.
She's good.
And your giant wolf companion. The style and appearance of the environments, like the player character and the NPCs. For me, a lot of the stuff, they've just knocked it out of the park. Like, so much about what they've shown of Soulframe is right up my alley.
I think it's like okay, right? I mean, I'm not massively sold by it, but I think it looks great, right? It's not necessarily like super like my style, but it's close. It's like a 7 or an 8 in terms of style for me.
I can't wait to try this game out. But the gameplay is pretty much number one, top of the list of priorities of importance for me. So I am hoping that they take this feedback, that they improve on the issues that people are pointing out, but hoping that they take this feedback, they improve priorities of importance for me. So I am hoping that they take this feedback, that they improve.
Why? Why? Why did you need to do this? This is crazy. Oh my God.
Improve on the issues that people are pointing out, but mainly I just hope it actually feels good to play, because I want to make a note of this here. How a game feels when you play it versus how it looks in a video isn't always one for one. Throne and Liberty is a great recent example of it. Throne and Liberty is a great looking game. It is very pretty, certainly. It's got pretty awesome looking animations, but boy, it feels pretty rough, like ranking amongst the worst feeling implementations of tab target I've played in an MMO.
Thank you. I was getting fanboys getting mad at me. This game plays like a piece of shit. You had more control over a Warcraft 3 hero than you do with your character in Throne and Liberty. It was the biggest piece of garbage I've ever played. It's a trash game. It's so bad. I will play it on release because I have nothing better to do. But man, it's so bad.
The amount of clunkiness to that game.
People are telling me they're changing the combat.
It's not very enjoyable compared to other iterations of tab targeting that I've played. So maybe Soulframe is the case where playing it feels great. It's not looking so great on these early gameplay showcases. That is certainly a possibility. I think another thing to consider here is that it is still very early days for Soulframe. The game has, after all, only been in development for 2.5 years. We learned this shortly after Soulframe was revealed, when Steve Sinclair stated that they had only been working on the game at the point of the reveal for roughly 6 months. So we're at 2.5 years. That is not a very long time as far as like game development timelines go, especially for games like this. This shared world MMO light live service game. Most of these spend 4 to 5 years in development before we actually.
I really hope that he's right about this. I mean, hey, maybe. Right? Maybe.
See them in action before we actually see like honest to goodness gameplay. So 2.5 years in, I wouldn't say this looks all too bad. Now we do know that timeline's a bit accelerated because they are building off of Warframe, but nevertheless, the point still stands. It's pretty early days for Soulframe. You could argue they shouldn't have showed it this early.
Can we think of a game that's changed its combat in a massive fundamental way in the trailers for the game versus the release? Because, like, I'm trying to think to myself, Warframe for sure. Yes, I didn't play that one, so I'm not sure. The Witcher changed a bit. I've just never seen a game that came out, that got announced and the trailer's combat was awful, and then the game came out and it was way better. Like, from my personal, like, thinking back myself, I've never remembered that happening.
But we can't argue that it's not still pretty early days. If we're looking at typical development timelines for video games, 2.5 years, it ain't much. I think part of what we're seeing here actually is just Digital Extreme's willingness to get players involved in the earlier stages of development. This is exactly what they did with Warframe. That game was very rough when it first came out, but many people still enjoyed the core foundation, myself included. And they've said that they were going to do as much again with Soulframe. When they announced it, they said, hey, we're going to bring people in pretty early. In fact, they have been
this is the reason, by the way, I've been giving so much feedback and I've been as negative as I am, is that I think that a developer that's been as receptive and has as much of a community investment that the Warframe developers have is probably the only type of developer that will listen to what I'm saying and what other people like me are saying and take it seriously. Like, I'm not giving the feedback because I want the game to be bad. I'm giving the feedback because I think the game could be good. Like, for example, Throne and Liberty, it's a piece of shit. It's not going to get better. It's not like I'm going to be able to say... no, it's... Yeah, bro, I'm checked out on that one. I'm checked out.
Limited test, which they call Preludes, for several months now. People have been playing this game. These are essentially vertical slices of Soulframe to let a small pool of players test out and play around with some early systems and features. From what I've been able to tell, they've been testing like a very limited portion of the open world, some of the procedural dungeon systems, the event things like the event system where roaming bosses move around the world, and some character progression. But it is still very much a limited in its size and scope. Nobody's playing the entire game right now. I guess maybe except for the developer themselves. Now, during TennoCon, they announced that these Prelude tests will be going completely open to anyone who wants to try them sometime.
Somebody says, you rage quit Elden Ring DLC and played using Godge mode. You're in no place to give feedback. You're dog shit at games. I am garbage at games. But you know what I'm not garbage at is being able to identify mechanics and understanding them. That's why I was able to figure out a mode that worked. So... Oh, you're just mad about... Oh, bro. You just... What are you doing? What are you doing, bro? What are you doing in the chat? You spent the last 2 hours getting mad. Why are you doing this? Like, what's wrong with you? Like, I'm confused. Like, how do you do this to yourself, Copium? No, for sure. But, like, how do you do this to yourself where you go into somebody's chat for 2 hours and sit there talking shit? Like, why would you do that? I'm not mad, I'm just giving you feedback? It's not feedback, you're just a shit-talking retard. Why would I want your feedback? What do you mean? It's not feedback, you call me bad? Bro, here's the thing. Is that with all of these Souls-like games, I have been right about every single thing. I want you guys to keep that in mind. Every single game, every single system, every mechanic, and everything, I've been right. What about Sekiro? I said Sekiro was a great game. It wasn't a game for me. Go back and look at it again. Following since yesterday. We're going to stick to shit-talking Soulframe super cool. Get mad at me all you want. But at the end of the day, I want you to understand this about yourself, okay? You are sitting in my chat room, arguing and making yourself mad, and you've been doing this for 2 hours. I can't say anything bad to you, because nothing that I say is worse than what you're doing to yourself. You are wasting your life. You're wasting your time. You're getting mad recreationally. And it's going to have no benefit, no positive outcome. There's nothing that's ever going to come out of this. You're just going to be a retard, and that's all you're ever going to be. That's all you're doing. You're streaming to thousands advocating for a convicted criminal and rapist. You're ruining America. So you're not even mad about this. So when did I advocate for a convicted criminal and rapist? When did I do that? When did I do that? I'm curious. Do you really think that you're making America better by sitting in a chat room calling me bad at Elden Ring? What do you think you're doing? Like, I'm just really confused by this. At least I'm not a Trump-tard. You literally are a Trump-tard streaming all of his shit. So if I'm a Trump-tard streaming all of his shit, how do you justify me streaming Kamala Harris's rally yesterday? How does that make sense to you? Because I watched her entire speech, And I also watched Netanyahu's speech today, who Trump agrees with, and I criticized heavily. So how does that make sense to you? Why are you wasting his time on this kid? I think it just sets an example. And I want people to see these are the minds of the chat complainers. Is that whenever you press them or even ask them to explain what they're thinking, they can't even do that, and they're mad at you for something that didn't happen. This person's invented fan fiction in their head of what I'm doing. Then they've spent 2 hours getting mad about it in chat. And they say that I'm the one who's ruining America. Thanks for letting me use your shitty platform to expose you, worthless fuck. Well, honestly, guys, I think the Trump campaign should pay this guy. I do. I think that he did a better job advocating for Trump than almost anybody else ever has. Maybe this should be their vice president. I want you to know that the time that you've invested into getting mad at me and getting upset about things that I'm saying on my stream, none of it will ever matter, and you've wasted your life. And I can't even say that, because a person like this probably has a life that's completely worthless. So fundamentally, it would be impossible to waste something that has no value. However, whatever the closest thing to that is, that's what you're doing. And it's sad to see. It really is. A 34-year-old man doing this. Anyway, let's get back to it.
Later this year. Now that could be a mistake. After all, you only get one chance to make a good first impression, although I just get the sense that DE isn't much worried. Maybe that changes after the reception that they've gotten to this recent gameplay reveal, or maybe it doesn't. Maybe they're confident enough in where they're going to land with the end product that they are fine opening up testing for all, even if the game still has years of development left to go before
it's a bad idea to open up testing for everybody, because then people will play the game and think it's bad and never come back. People don't like changing their first impression, so if they do that, it's just going to hurt the game.
Gets anywhere near a 1.0 release. I'll say though, regardless of how rough parts of the combat looked in this most recent video, I am still very keen to check out the game. There is a lot about what they're putting together here that I really like, and I think Digital Extremes does have a good track record in Warframe. At least it has for me as a player, a person who's come back over the years to check out all the new stuff. I mean, I spent some money like 8 years ago in Warframe. I bought some packs, some cash shop stuff, right? I bought some frames. But since then, I've pretty much not spent a dime in like 8 straight years, but I've still just about every year gone back and checked out all these updates for free, playing for a couple of weeks at a time. That's been pretty good for me. It's been a pretty good return on investment, right? I don't know what the hardcore player base thinks about Warframe nowadays, but I know for me, as a casual, as a revisiting player, I've quite enjoyed it. I like what they're doing with Soulframe. I like the premise, the tone, the setting they're going for. If they can nail the gameplay feel, despite how it might look in these gameplay videos, if they can nail the feel, polish it up, get everything else right, this could be another winner. It's certainly very appealing to me, just the general pitch of it, right? The general thing that they're presenting, I find very appealing. So if they can nail how it feels, the gameplay, and then the systems, features, the replayable content, the progression systems, that would be great. Hoping for the best. We will find out soon enough. Like we said, Soulframe Preludes testing will be open for all at some point in the coming months, and I'll be sure to report back in once I finally get my hands on the game. That does it for this video. Thank you all for watching. What do you think of Soulframe? What do you think of the recent reveal? And do you have any hope for the game going forward? Let me know. All right, thanks guys. I'll see you next time.
Yeah, I agree with everything he's saying. Basically, I do. I think this is a huge issue. Like, if the combat for the game is bad, people will not play the game. That's really all there is to it. They will not play the game. They're not going to support the game. They're not going to like the game. And so everybody's going to say it's bad. That's it. Ruins everything? Yeah, it does. Like, it will ruin everything. Like, nobody is going to play a game that looks good but is bad. He's back. There's another guy. Yeah, but let me finish this up. I think that my feedback for Soulframe is incredibly valid. And I think that everybody out there who's trying to come up with excuses for the game is desperately trying to make a good game bad. All of us here that are giving feedback for this game are giving the feedback because we want the game to get better. And I can guarantee you that if the game releases in any way, shape, or form even close to the state that it's in, it will be considered a joke and it will damage the credibility of the developer. I'll link you guys the video.